Welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. I know end of year is a horribly busy time, so we really appreciate the time you're spending with us. I'm just going to share my screen. Thank you very much for joining us. We're the main focus of this event this morning. It's mostly, unfortunately, me talking, but we will have some time to run through some scenarios at the end of the meeting. Right, well, we'll make a start. And apologies to anyone who is experiencing problems. Yeah, I know not everyone. I know Google's sometimes a bit funny with people. Okay, so today I'm largely, I'm going to make apologies as well because I'm using a completely different office, so Flora's office, because we've got interviews, and I'm not used to how her machine is set up. So I will apologise if there's a little bit of delay in things. I'm going to make that a little larger and hopefully people can see that. I hope everyone can see that. So just quickly running through the agenda this morning. We've done the welcome and setting the scene. So we'll just run through the awards boards, what the awards board's about, the purpose, who's involved, the timings, the organisation, the administration, and some of the key things that you'll be focusing on as you go through the agenda, and the important things that need to be done following the awards board as well. We're also going to be looking at some scenarios. So these are real life situations. Yeah, so it's an opportunity to just have a chat with your colleagues. So we'll put you into breakout groups, have a chat with your colleagues and look at some of those, how you might approach these particular issues. We'll come back for a plenary and then we'll be finishing at 11 o'clock. So the awards board is the most important part of the whole Access to HE process. It's where your students have their award of credit agreed. So the awards board is the body that actually agrees the recommendations made by the moderators and the tutors and confirms that the students who've got all their full 60 credits have achieved their diploma. The other thing that's really important about the awards board is, as you know, we're working with adult students and lots of things can happen with students during the course of their year. 1 year access course is, I think, one of the toughest courses I've worked with. And lots of things happen during the year to prevent students, so extenuating circumstances, illnesses, things that happen in people's lives and prevent them from being at that position at the end of the year to have their full 60 credits. So you'll also be considering possibly referrals, which is we'll come on to later, extensions through extenuating circumstances and other special cases that will all be relevant to your students. All this information, and I will be sharing this presentation with you after the event. All this information is in section E of the QAA's grading scheme handbook. There is now also an addendum to section E, and I'll talk about that later when we'll talk about extenuation. But yeah, section E. So the link in this document, so you'll have this presentation, and the link is included in this presentation. So please make sure you take a look at that section. It's really useful, and will support your give you some background about the chairing responsibilities. So the Carver Awards Board. So I'm just going to try and move my cursor and open up because I realised I didn't. So just have a quick look. So I think most of you will have seen the awards board chairs, the awards board agenda. So it's agenda and a minutes form all in one. So Jackie will send this out prior to your awards board, and she will complete it with as much information as possible. So largely, this will support, and there's guidance in it as well. This will support your process through the awards board. We'll talk about all these sections as we go through the presentation, but for anybody who hasn't seen an awards board agenda, it's just I just thought I'd give you a quick rundown of what it looks like. So when I mentioned Jackie will complete as much information as possible. So for example, in section 6, any student who hasn't got their full 60 credits and hasn't been withdrawn, Jackie will input in there. So that will act as a reminder for you to run through to those people. You'll be talking about those students. So so we have got all the dates for the awards board. So they've all been, I know Jackie's been chasing for them, and they have all been agreed. So they're usually in the last week of June, within the first 2, or between the last week of June and within the first 2 weeks of July. That gives us enough time to process the results and to certificate the students and to get the paperwork together for end of year and get ready for the UCAS upload. So the UCAS upload happens around the 27th of July, and that is the date. So the UCAS upload date, we aim to get certificates to you in your college on the same day as the UCAS upload. So that's why it's a very tight turnaround process for us. And but that's why, so thank you for getting all your dates in order. The timings of the meetings, so what's essential and what sometimes hasn't been happening over the last few years, especially during the with the pandemic and more online meetings, is that we want to make sure that moderators meet with the teams. So the moderation has to happen separately to the awards board. The moderators meet with the teams. They have reviewed samples online. They've met with the teams and they've agreed the award of credit. And the external moderator makes that recommendation, which they then take forward to the awards board. But that must be separate to the awards board meeting. So traditionally, I think pre-pandemic, when we had in-person meetings, the moderator would come on the day of the awards board. So they would do their moderation and then in the morning and attend the awards board in the afternoon. But at the moment, so because these meetings are now online, the moderation can happen prior to that. It will, the moderator will request their sample online. They'll have that meeting with the team, and then they'll attend the awards board. So we've got a bit more flexibility about when the moderators can come, but it must happen before the awards board. So just a quick word about the core membership. There is it is an official meeting, so it does require choracy. Obviously, you as a chair, that's the most important person to have in place. So we have a chair who is usually from the senior management team, and so it usually has quite a good handle on what's happening with the access to HE provision. We have a course representative for each diploma being reviewed. And that course representative, it doesn't have to be the course leader, but somebody should be there to present the course leader's feedback for the year. But each diploma should be represented. We also require our external moderators to be there. Now, they're not always able to attend, sometimes because moderators will moderate more than one programme, and there's a clash of dates and they might not be able to attend. Sometimes, they're all, quite often they're working in their own colleges and they've got other issues and more priorities that they need to attend. But the understanding when they're appointed is that they make arrangements to attend the awards board. So if a moderator isn't able to come, then the moderation should happen prior to the awards board, so that the lead moderator has their external moderation report and can represent them at the awards board. We make sure that there are at least 2 external moderators at the awards board, because there has to be, CAVA needs to be represented, so they are our CAVA representatives. So we have an external moderator and CAVA, they are external moderator and CAVA representative. If with some of our providers, you might only have 1 program or 1 or 2 programs, and therefore only 1 moderator, then a member of the CAVA staff team will be attending as the CAVA representative in that case. And I think we've sorted out those lists already, so I'm sure Jackie will be in touch with you to let you know who your CAVA representative is for that meeting. And then also the really important person is the minute taker, which is provided by the college. And that minute taker, it's a really, really important job, and it has to be, it should be somebody who knows about access and knows about what's happening in access. We need the minutes of the meeting need to be very clear, especially when you were talking about students who haven't got their full 60 credits. We need to have a very clear understanding about what's happening with those students. So somebody, a minute taker who has some knowledge of the Access to HE diploma would be ideal. I know that's not always possible, but you know, please let us know if there's any problems with organising a minute taker for the meeting. Do we have any questions, Georgia? No? Okay. So we'll move on to the agenda items. So we're starting at the top. As I was saying, the awards board is a formal meeting, like a committee meeting. So a lot of these things will be very familiar to you. So agenda item 1, names and titles of those present. As we're saying, core C is we need to have a course representative for each diploma, an external moderator, at least 2. So there'll either be external moderator and a CAVA representative if you've only got 1 moderator, and a minute taker. So that's the core C. And we'll come on to why that's important, because each of those people have a specific role in the meeting. The first bit is, as I said, formal meeting. So very much like any other agenda that you'd be familiar with. So it's apologies for absence, and just letting us know if say the course leader isn't able to attend, how that course is being represented. The second bit is a little bit of admin about the decisions made at the awards board and what can and can't be considered. So we look at the awarding the Access to HE diploma. We're looking at the unit grades. You may well be discussing extenuating circumstances and why students haven't completed their full 60 credits, and talking about the support arrangements and deadlines in place. So the main thing to think about, to consider, is this is the final place in the year where decisions are made. Anything that's considered and agreed by the awards board, the only way we can change those decisions, so if there are errors or if there are appeals, sort of student appeals post awards board, the only way we can undo those decisions or change those decisions is through an appeals panel. So it's really important for your course teams to get the grades, make sure the grades are correct, and make sure you've got as much information about any student who hasn't got their full 60 credits as possible going into that meeting, because it can be, it's a little bit, there's quite a lot more admin afterwards if you need to change, make any changes to the agreements of the awards board. So item 3 is looking at the awards board regulations. So we expect you to have the regulations with you on the day, just in case you might need to refer to something. It doesn't usually happen, but it's just good practice to have it there with you. So Carver's Yellow Book is always handy. And also, as I mentioned earlier, so Section E of the Grading Scheme Handbook, it's just got some advice about, obviously look at it beforehand, but if it's there on the day as well, that's really helpful. Obviously, the discussion in the awards board should be confidential. So you're talking about students' personal circumstances, and that discussion shouldn't go any further than the people involved on the day. The other really important thing is that information about progression opportunities shouldn't be discussed. So, for example, if John Smith is waiting on he's got an offer from Cambridge University, for example, and he needs all straight distinctions to get through to meet his offer, you cannot discuss the requirements for progression at that meeting, because it will potentially skew the sort of bias the conversation. So you can talk about progression more broadly in terms of how many students you've got who've got offers or are progressing to such and such universities, but not individual cases. So that's really important. So item 4 is the course leaders report. This section is really useful, not only for it's a really good, it provides a summary of the year, any good practice, any difficulties they found, any feedback from the students that was useful and has helped you develop the course. And also finally confirming that the students have completed their work, the work has been assessed, and it's been internally moderated and externally moderated, and the recommendation for award of credit or the mark sheet is complete. I should have mentioned that earlier. So the mark sheet is, so we've moved back onto the Carver database this year, and grades and grade indicators should be input to the Carver database, and the mark sheet is another key piece of documentation that should be completed prior to the awards board. The course leader can print that out at any time to check grades, to check the accuracy of the inputting, and the external moderator will also have that and use that as the basis of their sampling process. So the external moderator will be so now that we're coming up to the awards boards, your teams will be chased quite strongly for to make sure that the database is as complete as possible, because the moderators will use that information to make their sample. So that's another key piece of information. But so yeah, we'll expect so the course leaders will confirm that the database is up to date, and the award of credit has been recommended for the awards board. The reason this is really important for us is that we quite often use that information. We will take that out of your awards board and put it into your diploma quality review. So at year end, that information, we use that information to help us review and raise, will help us as the end of year information for our review process. So yeah, so it's also really important for us and gives us a really good feeling about how your programs have run this academic year. So the external moderators also have a section, and again, they'll provide an overview. They will, in their meeting with the teams prior to the awards board, they will have gone through all the kind of more nitty-gritty details about specific students or specific units, and they'll provide an overview report for the awards board. So it will just be broad brushstrokes of what's happened over the year. But they'll comment on trends, they'll talk about grading statistics possibly, and any problems that they'll talk in broad terms if there's been any issues raised over the year. They may also reflect on the student feedback that they've received when they've met the students at the first meeting, or looked at the student feedback that they've had from their second visit. And that they will also confirm, hopefully, they'll also confirm that they are agreeing the award of credit. So for the awards board, and saying that that's now okay to, that the awards board will act on their recommendation. Is everyone happy with that so far? Because that's kind of the main bulk of so course leaders report, external moderators reports, and then we get into more of the kind of nitty-gritty about student information when we're considering individual students. Thank you for those. Thanks for those thumbs up. So item 6 is the largest, is the agenda item you're probably going to spend most time on, and it would depend on what's happened to your student cohorts over the year and individual cases that may have occurred and prevented, as I said, prevented students from achieving their full 60 credits. Now, CAVA is informed about some of these, and I've already spoken to several course leaders who've come to me with issues about students who have had specific problems, and I've said, yeah, so you need to get the information together and present it to the awards board, and the awards board needs to agree on what's happening with that student. So that's not it's not something CAVA can do. It's something that the awards board needs to do at year end. So if I just run through some of these, I'll take them one at a time, and maybe I think the most likely ones that you'll find, as I said, Jackie will populate this section of the agenda with all the students who have not been withdrawn but have not achieved their full 60 credits. So there should be a list of students that you can work through as the chair and make sure all of them have been discussed. Most of them will be extenuating circumstances, and I can talk about those in more detail. I'll just run through some of the other things that you might experience on the day. So recognition of prior learning. We don't get too many of these cases now, largely because it's such a, if you're having to map learning to units, the students might as well do the learning in the first place. The external moderator should have been informed about any cases of recognition for prior learning or RPL, and they will have signed off. They're agreed. They're signed off to say yes, they're happy that the prior learning meets the current units that have been identified for RPL, and that goes through to the awards board for final approval. Results for referred or deferred units, I'll come back to that one because I think that's deferred units are kind of linked to extenuating circumstances. Discussions of borderline cases, that again, this is very, very rare that we get these, because largely if you've got tutors who are not sure which way the grading should, whether it's, say, a merit or distinction, it's usually complete, usually that process is completed by the time you've spoken to an internal moderator and then maybe taking it to an external moderator if it's still unclear. Very rarely that comes to the awards board, but it's a possibility. So I don't think I've seen the case of that, but it may well, if people are really undecided, it could be taken to the awards board. Appeals. So our appeals process are there are only 2 cases that students can appeal grades. So if I just mention we have the representation process where students, if they don't agree with their grades, they can then go to their tutor officially and say they would like the grade reviewed. If they're not happy with their tutor's feedback, they can ask for it to be reviewed by the internal moderator, but that is where that process ends. So in terms of reviewing, so the awards board should not be in a position to review grades where a student says, I'm just not happy about the grade I've been given because. However, appeals, there's 2 grounds for appeals. One is error. So it could be input error. It could be maybe they've got there's been an error in the way something's being taught, or so academic error, academic administrative error, or on the grounds of extenuating circumstances that couldn't, for whatever reason, been declared at the time the student took the assessment. I've definitely had 2 cases of that this year. So, and we'll look at it in the scenarios, but I'll just mention it now. So there are, the student can appeal against grading decisions if, for example, they find out they've had a diagnosis for dyslexia that's come through maybe in the 2nd or 3rd term, and it's obviously affected their work, their previous work. So they could appeal those grades at the awards board. So it is possible for appeals to come through to the awards board, and we can talk a little bit more about what would happen with those students later on. So as we're saying, for the majority of students not achieving their full 60 credits, it will be extenuating circumstances. So whether the student's been ill or something's happened in their personal life and they've got to the end of the year and they've not been in a position to complete their final work, or they might have a number of assessments outstanding. There are a number of options. So the awards board would consider the student's case and agree the most appropriate plan of action. What should also come to the meeting to support those students is an idea of a learning plan. So an idea about how that student is going to be supported post awards board, so that's through the summer. So that could be, there are a number of options. The student could have a small extension to allow them to complete if they've just got maybe 1 or 2 small units to finish off. They could have a bit of extra time, so they could be given extra time over the summer to complete. They if they complete before our upload date to UCAS, then they can be included with their cohort. They might need a bit more time. It depends on the extent of their circumstances. They might need a bit more time, and we've got until the end of August to allow students to complete for this year. They may have, there may be cases where students are just not in a position to finish this year, and you may want to give them the opportunity to carry on into the next academic year. So we could look at it as they could have a break in learning. They could quite often carvers. So if they're still on the system, we tend to roll we do look for the discussion in the awards board, and we will roll them over. So there's no extra charge from Carver to take a student into their 2nd year. We view them as a part-time student, but obviously not every college is in a position to do that, and there's obviously some the student will need support, and that would need funding. So that's if some colleges are happy to roll the students over. Other colleges, I know you don't so much, but that's from Carver's point of view, it's not a problem for us. We would roll the student over. They would continue and complete in that second academic year. So there are a number of different options that you can consider. And we would just ask you to really focus on the learning plan and what is most appropriate for that student to enable them to finish. So we've had awards board minutes where we've had students with nearly half of their 60 credits to complete, and then given to the end of August to do that, which just doesn't seem, it's not fair on the students, and it didn't seem like a very sensible plan. But so really consider what's going to be possible for the student, and make sure that plan's in place. And if you can just let us know, give us the dates when they're going to be finished, that would be ideal. So so the late completers, that's all kind of really caught up with extenuating circumstances, as well as the deferred units. So for referrals, you may have cases of referral. So with the Carver's submission process, each student has a submission opportunity, a resubmission opportunity, so those both are eligible for grading. Then if the student doesn't meet their all learning outcomes on that resubmission opportunity, there is an opportunity for a third go for a referral, and that attempt is capped at a pass. So that attempt will, if it goes beyond the awards board, you'll need to agree that the student has that opportunity, agree that the opportunity for the student. So things to check are, how many credits have they requested for referral? Generally, it's only maybe the last few to get them through their diploma, but they can have no more than 15 credits of referral. If the tutor's supporting them, generally that we tend to say, if the tutor's made a case for the referral opportunity, it's usually fine, but just check that the student hasn't had more than 15 credits worth of referral opportunity. But that will, again, you need to decide when the deadline for that piece of work would be, and make sure that Carver has that information, so that information's noted on the awards board agenda. So I think I've gone through most of these. So we've talked about extenuating circumstances. So I've just added a bit more detail about in writing about some of the possibilities, some of the options you may decide that are appropriate for the students. So there's a bit more information there. I would like just to talk about extenuation. Now, I haven't been contacted, so cases of extenuation. So following on from the pandemic arrangements up to last year, we had, so QAA brought in a process for extenuation where if either a student's learning had been interrupted, maybe because they were ill, or it might have been a case where the college, something happened in the college and there's been an interruption in the teaching process, and students would have been disadvantaged because they couldn't complete their, they didn't have the full teaching to support their assessments. So the cases of extenuation are the student, the idea is that for the outstanding units, the student must provide evidence, or the tutor must map evidence to meet learning outcomes for the outstanding unit. Now, that evidence can be taken from other units. It might have been completed in the run-up to completing the unit. So it could be notes, it could be evidence of discussion in the classroom, things like that. It can't be based on what the student is, the expectation that what the student could have achieved. It must be based on actual evidence. Most cases would be raised with CARVA prior to the awards board. So it's generally issues where students haven't been able to complete their work, and extenuation has been seen as the next step. So generally we're informed about it first, but it may be the case that there's an emergency that happens prior to the awards board. We would hope that CARVA would be informed so we could support you through that process. But the awards board's responsibility is that the awards board is responsible for reviewing that case and making sure that you're happy and agree that the evidence meets the learning outcomes. The moderator will have done that prior to that, so it probably would be based on the recommendation from the external moderator. But it's the awards board's responsibility to confirm that recommendation. Is there any questions about extenuation? I know they're very rare, and they're quite, because we have to map evidence. It's not always it's not an easy case, so it's not straightforward. But so agenda item 7 is kind of when we're picking things up. So the confirmation of the recommendation for award of credit. This is usually very straightforward. Generally, we'll say that all the students who have achieved their full 60 credits. So if the moderator's happy that the grades are appropriate, they will recommend recommend approval of the recommendation for award of credit, or the mark sheet, and the awards board as a whole, so the group as a whole, will approve the grades. So it's quite a straightforward agenda item, and based on, so the course leaders said yes, everything's been assessed, internally moderated. External moderator says agreed, yes, I've externally moderated the grades are appropriate, the recommendation for award of credit is appropriate, and the awards board agrees the recommendation for award of credit. So it is quite a straightforward. Generally, after all the individual student comments, it's a very straightforward item. So we're getting towards the end of the awards board meeting now. We have a section for a nomination for a contact person for the summer. It's really key that we have somebody in place. It doesn't have to be the same person, but I know people go away on holiday, etc. But if we can have a contact person to cover the whole of the summer, that's really helpful. The reason for that is that with the appeals process, we need somebody to be able, so if there has been, for example, an error on the database and the student's got an incorrect grade, the only way to put that grade right is to come back to the college and ask for the original, the assignment brief. And so we have evidence of the correct grade, and then we can take that to our appeals. We put that case together and take that to our appeals panel. But we must have a contact person at the college. If we haven't got a contact person at the college, we risk students missing their university places. So please, can you make sure somebody is there? As I said, it doesn't have to be the same person through the year, but just you've got cover over the summer period. It's really important. So nominations for CARVA Student Awards. So I think most of you will have attended the CARVA conference, either in person or online. We have an annual student awards, which are linked to the larger AVA Keith Fletcher awards. But the CARVA Student Awards, we have 2 categories. One's for outstanding academic achievement, so it's students who have achieved highly, got full distinction grades, worked really hard and are exemplary in their cohort. And the other category is outstanding commitment to studies. So with most of our access to, I think the majority of our access to HE students have show outstanding commitment to study, but some of the cases we hear and some of the past nominations have just been extraordinary. The sort of things that students go through and still manage to turn up on their course, complete their work, and and come in and support other students as well. They're absolutely amazing. Some of the stories we've had are amazing. So the nominations are open until, and I will, when I send this out, I will link the nomination form into this slide for you. So the nominations are open until the 3rd of October. So please, the awards board's a really good time to, when you're discussing student cases, to it's fresh in your mind. So if you've got any student nomination ideas, then please, it's a good time to talk about them at that point. So the last two items are, again, very, very similar to any other agenda. So any other business, could be anything. It could be changes of staff. It could be changes in the diploma offer that you're making. It doesn't. It's whatever's useful for you to note, and the date of the next meeting. And I've put in brackets there indicative. So it is just. If you're wanting to keep the date of your meeting around the same time as the one this year, that's fine. We're not going to hold you to it, and Jackie always comes back to you at coming up to the awards board the following year to say if that date's correct or if you'd like to change that date. So we don't hold you to it, but it just gives an idea about when your meeting is going to be held. So that's the end of the awards board agenda meeting. So just a little word about what happens after the awards board. The awards board minutes are a key part of the information we require for certification. If we don't have your awards board minutes, we cannot certificate your students. So it's really important to get the minutes. So the minutes need to be in good shape and back to Carver, I think within 2 days of the meeting. They need to be signed by the awards board chair, and we also ask them to be signed by the lead moderator. We generally send them out to the lead moderator for signature when they come to us. So if you don't, please just, I think just the main thing is just if you can sign them off as the chair and get them to Carver within the 2 days, that's fine. Don't worry about it. If you can send them out to the lead moderator, that's fine, but don't worry about it. The most important thing is getting it to Carver. We need to, especially in the section 6, we need accurate information about what's happening with those students, because we rely on that to support those students through the summer, and it also helps us with the appeals process and with chasing our any late students' results, so we can make sure we can get those students certificated before year end, and hopefully in good time. So I know there'll be students who are just completing, coming up to the UCAS upload. If we can get those students through and we can agree those grades, those final grades up to the UCAS upload point, they will be they'll be uploaded and certificated with their peers. So that's the ideal. Obviously, there'll be people who carry on into the summer, but yeah, the more information we have about those students and the more accurate that is, the better. So yeah.
One quick question. There wasn't an agenda point 10. Was there meant to be? It went from 9 to 11. Kelly's just asked.
That's my fault. I think yes, I'll go back and I'll correct that as well. Kelly, thank you. No, I think all the agenda items, it's just my misnumbering. So I do apologise for that. Thanks for picking that up. But I will make sure that's all accurate. I think we might have taken out, I think we took out we had an item asking for alumni or students who wanted to keep in touch with Carver, and we took that out because it was we had student information that we didn't need, basically. So we've got different ways of doing that through, and we'll provide that information to students with their certification. But yeah, I apologise for that. Is there anything else, Georgia?
That was the only question.
Okay, so we are at, I can't remember what time we were meant to start. We were going to start at the agenda, sorry. Yeah, so we've got a number, it's got a few scenarios for you to have a look at. We're going to put you into breakout groups.
Yeah, that's fine.
I was just wondering if it would be useful to maybe have a quick comfort break and then come into the scenarios.
Yeah.
Yeah. What time will we due to start?
So we might start at 10:10, so we are a bit behind.
Oh, right. Okay. If people are happy to power on through, I still would like to finish at 11. Okay, that's great. I've got lots of thumbs up. Oh, brilliant. I haven't seen that one before. Yeah, so Georgia's going to post the awards board scenarios into the chat.
Once they go into the groups, we won't have access to that yet.
Yeah, so if you can just click on the link and call it up before you go into the groups. Yeah, because you won't be able to see it once we put you into the groups. So it's just an opportunity to have a look through those scenarios, and then and chat and share good practice or share information. So we're going to put you into groups, and if we can get you to come back, I think we'll give you a quarter of an hour. So there are 4 scenarios. So if you just look at a couple of them, that's fine. It's just to get some discussion going, and have a look at the types of things. So these are real things that have happened in awards boards. I don't want to scare you, but it's just good to have a think about how you might deal with it. So if we come back at 11:15, we'll have a short plenary before we. Oh, actually, we'll come back at if we come back at 10:50, we'll have a short plenary before we finish, and then we'll end at 11. So we'll just put you into your group. If everyone's okay and picked up the scenarios, we'll put you into your groups. We'll press the button now. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you found that interesting and useful to actually chat across colleges, to see different approaches. So we've got a short plenary just to share some information if people would find that useful. Can you all see the scenarios? Is that large enough? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so let's if we just I think I'll just open it up to people. So if we start with the first one, so student 1 missed the deadline for the first submission, didn't have extenuating circumstances, didn't meet all assessment criteria, failed to meet all criteria on his second submission, and the student then claimed extenuating circumstances relating to the period of the second submission. So it's obviously brought the case, wanted to bring the case to the awards board for consideration. So what were your thoughts around this one?
Yeah, we looked at this scenario and we were discussing that this shouldn't necessarily be presented at the awards board, and we were saying that in terms of them missing the first deadlines, this should have been discussed prior to the awards board happening, and whether any action plans need to be put in place prior to sort of the second submission. And obviously the extenuating circumstances would depend on what the scenario is as well. But yeah, ideally this should have been concluded and decided what the action plan is prior to the awards board.
Yeah, I'd agree. In normal circumstances, yes, that should have happened. So the student really should have claimed extenuating circumstances at the time he was taking his resubmission opportunity, and then support arrangements could be put in place. It doesn't say what his extenuating circumstances are. So, you know, it could have been anything. It could have been something like, something happened in his personal life that would have affected his ability to fully meet that submission opportunity. However, if he's claiming extent, now this could be the case for a pre-appeal, so like an appeal. So he could be, if it's something that has extenuating circumstances that I don't know, for whatever reason he couldn't raise at the time he was doing that second submission, that's probably why it's come to the awards board for consideration. So you would need to consider the case, consider what the extenuating circumstances were if he had a case. So if, for example, it was something, it could well have been something medical, and he's come with a medical, maybe a note from the doctor, something like that, to show that he was not fully fit at the time that he took that second submission. You may consider that and then decide that actually that second submission was not the grades from, that wasn't fair at the time, and to give him another opportunity that then would be eligible for grading. So he would still need to complete that submission, but you may well give him an opportunity to have that work graded rather than it being capped at a pass. Does that make sense? It's difficult without knowing the full circumstances of the extenuating circumstances of the extenuating circumstances, but the full details of the extenuating circumstances, and it could be a whole, extenuating circumstances are made for a whole range of things. So that is a possibility that I think, yes, you're right, it should have been sorted out prior to the awards board. However, it may be a case that it's like an appeal and would need to be considered by the awards board. Is that clear? Yeah. Okay. So student 2 received a merit for his research project unit, but is unhappy with his grade and he would like the work reviewed. So how would you deal with that one?
What we said was it would be very difficult to, you as you said earlier, you can't start discussing whether, if students have appealed against their grades at the time of the award board, you can't be discussing that. But so we would have expected to see an appeal to have been submitted, and for the work to have been reviewed already by either a lead assessor moderator internally before bringing that, and then consider that at the award board. But you can't be bringing work and raising the appeal at that stage, if you see what I mean. Yeah, we do try and emphasize that the representation process stops at the internal moderator. So even the external moderator, even their role, their role is to have an overview of the process and make sure the process is being operated appropriately, but they wouldn't be drawn into the discussion about whether that grade is appropriate. The view is that 2 professionals have looked at that piece of work and the outcome was agreed as whatever. If the original outcome is agreed, that is the end of the process. So the awards board the external moderator may well raise the fact that there has been a representation, and that representation process has been appropriately applied, but there is, that is as much as the awards board would, as much information as should come to the awards board. So yeah, absolutely, you shouldn't be being asked to review student grades at this meeting. Would anyone like to talk about, or did they discuss the third scenario? So the student submitted the work on time, didn't meet the requirements for merit and distinction, in our final term diagnosed with dyslexia, and asked for her grades to be reconsidered.
So what would you do, and what would your outcome be? To be honest, it's not an easy one. Yeah, I'm happy to talk through it if
I'm happy to. Well, Sean.
Yeah, we're just gonna. Oh, just give me a second. I've got a bit of feedback. I'm just gonna. I'm on twice actually. I'm on my phone and on my computer. Just give me 1 second.
Sure.
I thought I'd jump in because Carol's doing all the talking and it's not really fair. So we did have a good chat about this one. It'd be quite unusual for a diagnosis to come up like this late on into a course for a start. My view is that obviously if the units have been submitted at a grade and they've been sort of verified at that grade needs to stand. However, if there's a diagnosis and it's late on and we've got time, I mean, this again, it shouldn't really be discussed at the board. It's very late to be discussing it there. We should be putting stuff in place to allow extra time and support for the learner to probably complete at a later point at the grades that she needs to achieve or they need to achieve. But I'm personally a little bit uncomfortable about just sort of changing the grades based on the fact that something has come through. It's about us supporting the learner to get to the grades that she deserves rather than just trying to up the grades when the evidence of the work doesn't support, the grades that have been, or does support the grades that have been awarded, but not what she wants, if that makes sense.
That's spot on, Sean. I think so. There is no within Access, unlike GCSEs or A levels. There's no opportunity for special considerations, which are when you might review grades that the student has achieved and change them according to, because something's happened. There's no mechanism for doing that in Access. So the student possibly would have a case. This has actually come up. So the student's diagnosis was in the last term of the year and was queried the grades because obviously dyslexia, the student had been subject to, had been suffering with dyslexia or had dyslexia, but those arrangements, the normal adjustments hadn't been made. So, for example, students would be able to generally have a bit longer, so I think it's 25% more time on an exam or on a, longer to complete a piece of work to make allowances for their difficulty. In terms of this case, if the awards board would agree that the student had a case for appeal, so agreed her appeal, we would ask her to complete. So the team would need to set fresh assessments, and she would redo the assessments with the full allowances in place. So that's, as I said, because we've got no arrangements for special considerations, we can't change grades on the basis of a diagnosis. The student would have to redo those pieces of work. Because the student had feedback and graded feedback on the work she'd already completed, on the assessments that had already been set, we couldn't give the original assessment. So there would have to be new assessments set to allow the student to complete. So it's a very complicated process. Obviously, these things sometimes happen and diagnoses slip through, but generally it would have been picked up much earlier in the course. But I think the student would have a case for appeal, but that is the process we would need to take the student through. Are there any questions about that? So it kind of doesn't, yeah, it's a really difficult one.
Yeah, I guess my only question is, in reality, then they'd have a really small amount of time to be able to redo such a large volume of assessments. It would be then whether they chose, I guess, to carry over into a second year.
Yeah.
The option, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they could decide maybe they've maybe just 1 or 2 units that they want to redo. So it would depend on the extent, you know, that it depends how they performed during the year. And yes, they possibly could be using this as an excuse to improve their grades. But that's why we'd have to make it fair to the other students that they wouldn't get their original assessment. They would have to have a new assessment. But yeah, you would also need to consider maybe not just the appeal and how many units the student would need to redo, but what that learning plan would look like going forwards. So it may well, you're right, may well go into the following academic year, and that might be a decision the student might not be happy with. So it's really sitting down with the student and telling them what the process is, and then saying, right, what do you want to do? So, you know, she may decide, no, that's absolutely fine, and I'll stick with my current grades, or I might want to do 1 or 2. So yeah, it's really sitting down with the student and deciding what the outcome's going to be. Are there any questions about that? I mean, it's rare. This is rare, but we have had a couple of issues raised this year already that I'm aware of that I've asked to take for the teams to take to the awards boards. Okay, so finally, I was going to say we're running just slightly over time. Are people still happy? I'm happy to go through this one, or we can finish here.
I'm really sorry, but I need to leave for another meeting. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine, Diane. We'll
Thank
just
you.
run through this and we'll finish anyway. So thank you.
Thank you.
So finally, the final student has had to attend court, obviously suffering extenuating circumstances, and her learning has been interrupted. The tutors made the case to the awards board to extend the end date to complete after her court case finishes. That's fine, Caroline, thank you. So what sort of arrangements do you think would need to be put in place to support this student?
I think we just said in our group that the student would need to have kind of like a very clear action plan put in place. So we could agree at the awards board and say, right, the agreed date is the 30th of August as an example, but it would then need to be really clear in terms of what's going to happen between that period. And because that plan might not be available before the awards board and it would need to be discussed with the student, they'd need to go away and be given, you know, a couple of days or a week to put that together so that the student agrees to it and everybody's in agreement that the college can support it and the learner can achieve it.
Yeah, I think if possible, if your teams can come to the awards board with that learning plan in place, so they've had a talk with the student, they know the circumstances, they understand what the student is able to complete, you know, what's practical for the student and sensible in terms of their learning plan going forward. And it's really just making sure you're not setting them up to fail, but also if their plan is agreed and with an end date is agreed at the awards board, again, the only way we can undo that date is to take it through an appeal. So if the teams can come fully prepared to the awards board with as much information as possible, now that might not always be possible. So yes, I agree that it might need to happen afterwards, but if they can come to the awards board with as much information as in place as possible, that would really support the awards board in making their decision, but also in helping CAVA, because we wouldn't need to chase up what was happening with that student past the end of the awards board date. Are there any questions about any of those? So some of these are quite rare cases. So unlikely to come up, but certainly I think it's mainly as much information as possible for any extenuating circumstances coming to the awards boards, and a learning plan in place with the student. So thank you very much. Are there any questions at all about anything we've covered today? Well, thank you so much for your attendance today. I know, as I said, I know it's a really busy time of year, so we really appreciate you coming. I have included, and Georgia's going to put an evaluation in the chat. Please let us know your thoughts about the briefing you've just attended, if it's useful, you know, if the format's right for you. I hope you have found it useful, but please, if you've got any questions at all, we'll send the presentation out and the video. But please, before the awards board, if you've got any questions at all, just drop me a line. I'm more than happy to have a chat, or we'll be able to deal with your queries via email. So thank you very much, and have a really good afternoon.